Hi, hello, hi, it is me, Cupid, and today I want to talk about something near and dear to my heart. I want to talk about women. I can't keep doing that. I was like, how long can I commit to this bit of like, the little movements? It was not that long. I just like can't take myself serious. Oh my god, it's my cat. I just can't take myself seriously. I'm so sorry. And this is why they didn't ask me for Katseye. I mean, it also might have been because I'm not a woman, but honestly, I think the lack of talent was probably the bigger deterrent, if I had to guess. Today, we're going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, and that's women. I love women. They're great. We're also talking about racism, which, despite being a white twink, I actually don't like racism. And I am expecting my Nobel Peace Prize in the mail. I don't know what's taking them so long. Sometimes I do these and I feel like that clip of Lois Griffin going, 9/11 was bad. And it's like, yeah, girl. No shit. Really, really opening, the general public's eyes single-handedly. It's really hard. Recently, Katseye released their new single, Internet Girl, and it was received, well, we're not going to talk about, no, we are actually. It was not received well. It was not received well at all. It made the internet go, girl. I mean, it wasn't as bad as Gnarly, but much like with Gnarly, we're seeing this sort of Katseye hate train, which it's not fair that the girls are getting hate, but I also, it's like when you put that out, it's kind of like, yeah, I get why people think you're an easy target, unfortunately. Again, I don't think they should get the hate, but it's like, Hello, it's me in the future. Ooh. Yeah, I would like to formally apologize. I have grown as a person since making this. I actually think Internet Girl by Katseye is fun. I like it. I hate that goddamn baby voice. But apart from that, I think the song is good. It's fun. It's silly, it's not like a deep emotional moment, but sometimes fun is great. However, I have noticed that each time Katseye is in some sort of hot water, we can almost always see certain girls, that the people decide to pick apart more than others. Some girls kind of remain unscathed pretty much always, and other girls, if they even so much as blink a little too hard, everyone wants them, like, to die, and everyone's calling them a flop. Which is so mean. It's so mean, and we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about why that is. Spoiler alert. Spoilers. It's racism. It will go ahead and be racism.
At home, I'm Jody. I can say or do whatever feels right. But at school, I'm the queen of the Negroes, the perfect African-American teen, the role model for all of the other African-American teens at Lawndale. Oops, where'd they go?
Now, when a group of people become famous at the same time, say for being in a movie together or a band together or anything like that, we almost always see that the white people get treated a lot better, either by the company or by the general public as a whole, which isn't new information, right? The crowd is not saying anything. They're actually quite bored because they're like, yeah, girl, say something we didn't know. It's florals for spring, right? But when it comes to Katseye, right, everyone there is a woman of color, so how exactly do racists decide who they're gonna hate the most? Do they look inwards and think, well, I guess I just have to base it off merit. No, they don't do that. Why would you think that? You're literally so dumb. Go to the back of the classroom. You failed, right? No, instead what they do is go to a term that society likes to refer to as the model minority, and that will be on the vocabulary test, and you already failed this test, so I really need you to, step it up, girl. This is sad, right? The model minority is this concept that society has deemed that one minority is the best minority, so to speak, right? They're what every other minority should try and embody. And there can be certain reasons for that. Sometimes it's because of desirability, sometimes it's because of being hardworking, or society viewing you as just inherently more successful or more academically gifted. And this is a term that we do usually, not always, but we usually see it directed towards Southeast Asians. There are also certain individuals who try to fit into this sort of model minority mold, but that's something we'll touch upon later, right? Southeast Asians have notoriously been viewed as more academically gifted and thus more successful, right? It's very popular in media for the smart character to be Asian and for that to kind of be their whole thing.
I got an A-, Tina.
You got an Asian F?
Now, we really get to see the concept of the model minority shine when we look at the members of Katseye, right? Members Yunchae, who's Korean, Sophia, who's Filipino, and Megan, who's half white, half Chinese, they usually are seen more favorably by the general public, right? They also, I think, tend to be in more promotional material that's targeted towards, like, K-pop fans, right? I think whenever they do, like, a TikTok video and it's, like, them and a K-pop idol, I usually see one of those three. I can't think of a time where I didn't see one of them, right? Now, compared to the other members, Lara, who's Indian, Manol, who's half Ghanaian, half Swiss-Italian, and Daniela, who's Cuban and Venezuelan, right? Usually, if someone from Katseye is receiving any sort of backlash, it's one of them. And that's not because they're inherently, more controversial. I think it does just have to do with the fact that people are wanting to find a reason to get mad at any of these girls, right? These girls' reputations, at the end of the day, they're all really clean, right? Like, anytime Katseye is under fire, it is almost always because of the company as a whole or like a song that they put out. It's never really ever for the individual behaviors of the girls. However, they are human, and if you breathe for long enough, someone's gonna find a reason to be upset. There are people who are clocked in on Twitter trying, praying, hoping that you slip up just a little bit so that they can write a tweet saying, "I never liked them." Post.
Education, none. References, none. Skills, none. Work experience. Let's not go there.
Now, I think it's important, obviously, if we're talking about the controversy and how people react to Katseye members, I think that it's really important for us to obviously talk about what controversies they've been in during their career, right? And I was gonna go like point by point and like really give a deep analysis for all of this, and then I realized that if I did that, this would be like 15 minutes. I could just talk about like that for like 20, 30, honest to God. So instead we're just gonna kind of rapid fire. I'll give like a little bit of context, and then there's certain parts that we're really gonna go in depth on, right? So for our first member, Sophia, the only thing I could find, well, okay, I do know that she's gotten like a little bit of flack for like how she talked about Manol on Dream Academy, but I don't know. I don't really feel like that's like, most of them did that, so I didn't really count that. But apart from that, the only thing I could really see was like on a Blackpink subreddit, someone said she liked a shady tweet, I think. I don't really know how much I trust Blackpink fans, and that's all I'm gonna say on them or on Blackpink. I feel like if I'm a little bit more critical of them, they're going to hit me with that do-do-do-do-do. Blackpink. Yeah. After her, there's Yunchae, who has some homophobic allegations. Megan, who's accused of underage drinking, which, who hasn't? Her bullying scandal with, like, Yunchae when they both started, and potentially almost saying the N-word. From what I saw, I think she just stuttered. I don't know. And here, with our last three girls, is where we're really gonna see a spike. Daniela, there's been allegations of her only really embracing her culture for fame. She's also received homophobia allegations. She mentioned that she listens to Playboi Carti, who's not a great person. She's received backlash for being too expressive, and people have suspected that she has some issues with her bandmate Manol. For Manol, she's gotten so much flack for her portrayal on Dream Academy. Oh my god, like good lord, you would think this girl came in and said, "I have a bomb, if you do not cast me, well, we're all going down. We're going down for real." Which she didn't have a bomb, fun fact. A lot of people have hated on her for being the least talented member of Katseye. She also has, drinking and some drug use scandals, and allegedly someone, I think on Facebook or something, said that, like, when she got famous, she kind of stopped talking to all her friends. And then lastly, Lara, who has received backlash for being Indian. No, I'm not joking. Being bisexual and dating a man. No, I'm not joking. Saying Noah Schnapp was hot, and then being like, oh, guys, never mind, because he's a Zionist. Showering with Yunchae while Yunchae was a minor, and then only embracing her culture for the aesthetic. And now this is all that I found based off, like, Google searches, and also, like, what I can remember from my time in the fan base. I'm not too involved with fan culture. I try to stay away from Stan Twitter. They scare me. I don't want to be involved. I'm already scared of the blinks. I don't want all that heat. But I definitely missed some stuff, I'm sure. But I do think that we can see that some of the members have a lot more controversies. But when we actually, sort of look at them, we see that a lot of these controversies are based more so on like speculation than actual concrete, like they did this or they said this. Almost everything that honestly all of these girls have gotten backlash for were things that were just kind of assumed. But we definitely do get to see that the girls of darker complexion, the girls who society kinds of view as less white, which again, very dehumanizing. I'm really gonna try not to use that, but it's like, that is at the end of the day kind of what society has placed on the model minority. We see that they get a lot more flack for doing the same thing the rest of the girls do, and I want to specifically hammer in on a few key points. Now, when we look at queerness and how the Katseye members are able to express it, I think it's really interesting to see how people react to Megan being queer versus Lara being queer. Now, I think for the most part, Megan being queer isn't really too much of a conversation. I feel like I really don't ever hear her and her sexuality really being talked about. I do think that if she like dated a guy, people would be upset because people care way too much about who bisexual people are dating, but that is a whole other topic that could be explored. But with Lara, she is dating a guy, and we are seeing people being very upset about that because, I mean, one, she's a woman of color and, they get hate for literally breathing, and two, biphobia exists. But I do also think that she just is getting more flack than I think Megan would. And I also think it's really interesting to see how people try and characterize Lara. A while back, she had mentioned that after the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, her and Yoonchae had shared a shower together. And this definitely could be weird in certain circumstances. I'm not going to deny that. I think this could so easily be like kind of creepy. But I think if you look at the video and when they talk about it and like look at the circumstances they were in, it's really hard to pinpoint that Lara was being weird, that she was, actively trying to like seduce Yoonchae, right? They had just gotten slimed at the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. Like, yeah, like I would want to get the slime off too. I don't really think wanting to feel clean is worth comparing someone to a predator.
Came in right before you.
But I was like, can I come in with you?
You didn't say that.
No, like I was like hoping that you'd be like, just come in.
No, cause I never
because
like.
I know you don't get down like that.
Yeah, cause I never like.
She doesn't get down.
Yeah, I don't really like exposing my like everything.
I feel like when it comes to Lara, it reminds me of, if anyone remembers, back in like Fifth Harmony days, there used to be a really popular ship called Carmen. It was between Camilla and Lauren, and it was originally, it started as just like a fun little key, and then things got like really weird. And I remember both of the girls talking about not both the girls, I remember Lauren specifically kind of talking about how it made her feel because she was openly queer, but Camilla was straight. And she had said, people thought Camilla and I were into each other, and that made me so uncomfortable, like disgustingly uncomfortable, because I was queer, but she was not, and it made me feel like a predator. It made me feel like a predator because the types of clips people would put together, and the stories that people would write, and the type of stuff like that, I was always the aggressor, and I was always the one turning her. I was always the one who was the more masculine one in the scenario, and it made me feel uncomfortable because that's not how I identify. When it comes to queer media as a whole, it's very common to see this trope of one character being really shy and closeted and not necessarily being at peace with who they are, and then we see another character who kind of helps them come to terms with that. And usually that character tends to be more masculine, more open, right? And a lot of times if we see a character in these queer stories that has a darker complexion, they tend to be the latter, right? They tend to be the more masculine one. They tend to be the one sort of pushing the other into realizing their true identity. And so I don't think that it's surprising to see that the Katseye fandom and Katseye haters have kind of put Lara in this box, right? The moment she told the story with Yoonchae, people realized they could twist it and sort of fulfill the narrative they already had in their head. And maybe that's where some of the biphobia comes from with Lara, is that they no longer can put these labels on her because she's with a guy. Obviously, she could be the more masculine one in the relationship, but it's not going to fulfill what those people want it to fulfill, right? Lara's queerness is intrinsically tied to her identity, so much to the point where people aren't able to separate her friendships with her relationships, right? Megan is allowed to be bisexual and she's allowed to be her own person without those things crossing. I don't ever really see Megan's queerness being associated with her relations with the rest of the Katseye members. But with Lara, like I said, with the Yoonchae situation, that obviously happened. And I know I've also seen like a lot between her and Minol, which again, it's important to note that Minol isn't, you know, she's unlabeled, right? She could be queer, that is an option, but we don't know that, and I don't think it's fair for us to speculate. But I do think when it comes to this, obviously it's her not having a label is really important, because we see this pattern of behavior with people making assumptions with Lara's queerness, right? Now, we also get to see something really interesting with queerness when we look at Daniela versus Yoonchae, specifically when we look at their homophobia allegations, right? And let me clarify, I don't think either of these girls are homophobic. I mean, they're both in a girl group with two very out and queer women, right? Like this, it just wouldn't make sense to me if that were the case, right? But to explain both of the situations, in Daniela's case, she had made some faces when the group was talking about the song Lunch by Billie Eilish, which, for reference, is about cunnilingus. It is about, you know, feasting on that like you were at a Thanksgiving buffet.
Like our theme song.
Feel very
Lunch by Billie Eilish. Lunch by Billie Eilish.
No.
Lunch Billie Eilish. Wait, should we say it together? 1, 2, 3. Lunch by Billie Eilish.
I mean, it's a crazy song. I mean, like, it's about sex, right? And they were asked what song they, like, feel like really speaks to them, and Megan said Lunch by Billie Eilish. That's like if someone was like, hey, what song do you think embodies you? And you were like, a Cupcake song. Like, oh, okay, right.
Calm.
Whereas with Yoonchae, like, her homophobia allegations came from an interview Katseye was in, where they were asked how they felt about the gays, and all of them were like, we love the gays, woo woo woo, and then Yoonchae was just kind of like there serving face, which, my queen, that's my girl, that's my bias. But yeah, they were both allegations were quite silly, honestly.
What is your message to the gays?
We love the gays!
When it comes to how Katseye stans treated Danielle and Yoonchae for these situations, it was vastly different, right? When it came to Yoonchae, people were very quick to laugh it off, right? It became a joke in the fandom. People were like, oh, Yoonchae's homophobic, right? Like, no one, to my knowledge, no one really thought that she was genuinely homophobic. And a lot of people were coming to her defense being like, well, you can't really say she's homophobic because of X, Y, and Z. And I don't think either of these girls are homophobic. Let that be known, right? Like, I think that these two girls are probably allies. I would be shocked if they weren't. However, when it came to Daniela, people were not as quick to be so understanding, right? When it came to Yoonchae, I don't really think I saw anyone actually say they thought that she was homophobic, but when it came to Daniela, oh yeah. Oh, there were people that were genuinely trying to convince you that she went into that interview and said, I hate these gays, we should stone them, right? Like, it was, they were really trying to make it seem like she came into that interview and left that interview Nicki Minaj's #1 stan. And quite frankly, I don't think that was the case. I know that that's not what happened at the interview. I watched it, okay? I watched all 18 minutes of that interview to see if she said anything else. She didn't. She did not. Okay. So I think it, you know, immediately we're kind of able to see that people are able to give Yoonchae more grace than they are Daniela. But I do think that one thing that's really interesting to note is the fact that Yoonchae, a lot of people were giving her grace because of the fact she was Korean, right? And obviously they didn't like say, oh, well, she's better than Daniela, she's Korean. But they brought up the fact that Korea is a more conservative country, which is true. And so, you know, by proxy, if Yoonchae was conservative or if she was homophobic, then it's okay because, well, she didn't grow up in an accepting environment. And I think that's so insane. You know, you are immediately kind of saying that, oh, like, certain people are allowed to be homophobic because that's just how they are. That's the same excuse that, like, people use when their, like, grandparents are, like, blatantly bigoted. They're like, oh, well, that's just how it was in her time, right? And something else that's super interesting to note is that no one said the same thing about Daniela. Obviously, she grew up in the States, but she's Cuban and Venezuelan, right? Like, I'm not 100% sure on Venezuela, but I don't think Cuba's very accepting of anything, from what I know, right? And it's honestly, even if that wasn't the case, I just think the fact that Yoon Che's heritage was immediately brought up, but no one really thought about Daniela's was so interesting, right? Like, Yoon Che's heritage was allowed to be used as basically a shield because whiteness kind of already views Southeast Asia as more superior than other countries, right? They already have this view of how Southeast Asians act, how they are, and whatnot. So we're allowing them to do certain things and get away with certain things because, I mean, at the end of the day, because of their proximity to whiteness, right? And it's really interesting to me that people are so quick to use this as a shield. People are so quick to kind of be like, oh, well, because of, you know, this person being from this place, like, they're allowed to act a certain way. But if anyone else did it, if anyone with a darker complexion did it, you would immediately crucify them. Why is someone's heritage allowed to be a shield? Now, obviously, like I said, I do think a lot of the hate that these girls get are from white people. I think it's also probably, you know, colorist Southeast Asians who are hating on, you know, specifically Lara too. I think a lot of them do that. But generally, I think it is mostly white people. However, there is a good subsection of people who hate on these girls who are also in the same demographic, right? And a lot of the time, they hate on them because of their culture and how they choose to express it, right? Sometimes people get hated on for expressing their culture too much. Other times people get hated because they don't express their culture enough. Or if you're Tarzan from All Day Project, you get hate for trying to take someone else's culture. This has nothing to do with the video. I just fucking hate Tarzan. Right, and in the case of Daniela and Lara, the latter seems to be why people are upset at them. Kind of. Sort of. We'll explain it, right? Now, I'm gonna mention Daniela's time on Dream Academy, and I do think it's important to note that there is stuff I can't give context on because I didn't watch the whole show, right? I watched a bit of it, but I couldn't get into it, and like Lexi said, I just didn't think it was very kind to the girls. I think the way they edited Manol, I think, was really mean. I think the fact that they didn't even give these girls, like, the fact that it was a robot, like, that's, come on. Dude. Also, the fact that they gave Marquis, like, 5 lines. Where was she? Where was she? That was my girl. I was rooting for, sorry, side tangent. That was my girl. They gave her, what, like 2 lines in the second mission? And I don't even, like, I can't remember what she did in the third mission, but, like, that was my girl. And they paid her dust. I'm so upset. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out of the way because I will be talking about how people feel about her time on Dream Academy, right? So for Daniela, a lot of people's issue with her heritage is the fact that they don't feel like she actually embraced it until the second mission, right? A lot of people have this sense that she only really embraced it in order to gain popularity because in the first mission, she was 17th out of 20 people. And then in the second mission, when she had allegedly kind of embraced her culture more, she rose to, I think, number 5, which, insane increase. I do also think it's important to note, though, that she did really well in the second mission. I think in the first mission, it's not that she faded in the background, but, like, she was competing with some really strong members. I think, like I said, Marquis, I think, did amazing. I think Adela, I think Megan. I think all of those girls were kind of taking center stage in their respective areas, and I think Daniela was just kind of pushed to the back, right? But when it came to mission 2 and they finally gave her time to shine, like, she did really well. And I think it's interesting that people say that there's a right way to represent your culture, right? And I think that it's really interesting that it doesn't seem like there's a concrete way. Like, sometimes people will say, like, you're just not representing your culture enough, but it's like, what exactly does that mean, right? Like, how exactly do you want these people to represent their culture? I just think it's a really weird thing to do, and I don't think people allow for nuance, right? And I don't think people allow for people to just be their own person before, you know, being who they are genetically. I don't know. I also think, though, it's important to note that even if maybe Daniela did embrace her culture a bit more to gain popularity, it worked. Like, it was smart. Like, it was so smart. She went 12 places up. Like, I don't know. For, like, a guaranteed spot in a global girl group, like, yeah. I can't blame her. Maybe it's because I'm white, right? Maybe I'm just speaking out of ignorance, but I do think that it's, like, people have done a lot worse for fame. Like, a lot worse. I don't really feel like we should be throwing so much shade at, Daniela. Now, when it comes to Lara, people, they've accused her for being Indian for the aesthetic, which, what the fuck does that mean? Being Indian for the aesthetic. Me being born and getting to select, like, it's like a wheel, and it's like one of those mobile ad games where they're like, choose, like, the words to describe you, and I pick Armenian. I'm not Armenian, by the way, in case that wasn't obvious. But, like, what do you mean for the aesthetic, huh? This stems from her posting a story about, it was in, like, solidarity for the Fulgam, one second. Mind you, I looked up how to pronounce this word before I started filming the clip. This clip is 3 minutes. I forgot in 3 minutes. My brain is literally made of styrofoam. What the hell? Pahalgam. It's Pahalgam. I wanted to make sure I didn't say that right. Wrong. I didn't say that right. I want to make sure I didn't say that wrong. The Pahalgam attacks, right? She had made a post being like, my heart goes out to everyone, and people said she didn't do it in a timely enough manner, right? That she waited too long. And I saw several comments being like, yeah, like, fuck her. Like, she's only Indian for the aesthetic. Which, I guess I really can't understand what that means at the end of the day, right? Like, how exactly is one supposed to represent their culture, right? Because if they represent it too much, people will be upset, right? If they lean into the culture too much, people will be like, okay, well, you're only doing it for fame. But then if they don't respond to something that's happening in a timely manner, then it's like, okay, well, you're not representing your culture enough. And I also think it's important to note that, like, these girls at the end of the day are celebrities, right? They are managed like a K-pop group, and K-pop groups notoriously are very strict on what the people are allowed to and not to post, right? And from what I see, I think they have a little bit more leniency than other K-pop groups, but I do think it's important to note that they still have a team of people behind them. And I mean, isn't it good that she at least just said something? I mean, there are a plethora of celebrities who refuse to talk about anything going on in the world right now, and people still support them. At least she said something? I don't know. Like, it just doesn't really make sense to me, because, like, I don't know, like, I really want to understand where they're coming from, and I want to understand what people are saying, but it just doesn't make sense to me, and it seems like these girls are getting hated on merely for their heritage, right? And other people seeming to dictate how they should and should not represent their heritage, when at the end of the day, I think everyone's ties to their culture are so intrinsically individual, and I think that's an amazing thing, right? Like, this thing can kind of tie everyone together, and it can create community, but how everyone chooses to view it is based completely on how they grew up and who they are as a person. It's like, religion, right? Like, there isn't a right way to be religious, unless, I guess, you're just being awful, right? And same thing with these, right? If you're using your culture as a shield to be awful, then yeah, maybe you're using it wrong, but that's not what these girls are doing, right? I just think that people want to dictate so badly how these girls express themselves, and I think for some people, maybe they see these girls almost as a vessel for representation, because, like, when it comes to just, like, a girl group, or, like, when it just comes to, like, fun pop music, especially over here, right, like, we don't really see that much representation, especially from the Indian side and from the Latin America side. We see, obviously, whenever Latin Americans make music, it's always pushed to Latin pop, or if, sometimes we push to, like, some sort of, like, rap trap thing, right? When a lot of times it could just be pop, right? It could just be considered pop music. But obviously, because of their heritage, people want to immediately put them in a box. And I think people are so hungry for representation that they're putting unrealistic expectations on these girls, so much to the point where they can't be enough because everyone wants something different from them. And I just don't think it's fair to treat the girls this way at the end of the day. They're humans, and I think that they should be allowed to express their culture however they see fit. The last thing I want to touch base on is Dream Academy, because I've talked so much about, you know, how racist people are, but I wanted to talk about something that I think actually brings a lot of, like, hope to the universe, maybe. And that's, you know, like I said, Dream Academy. When we look at the voting for Dream Academy, right, you would think that because it's fan voted that we would see certain groups of people kind of topping the charts, right? As we've said before, when it comes to Katseye, we see a lot of preferential treatment to the Southeast Asian girls, to the girls who have a, you know, closer relation to what white people view as whiteness. However, when we actually look at it, we see something interesting. We get to see that at the end of the day, white people aren't actually rewarding anyone for fitting their bill of what a minority should be. Instead, what we're seeing is that the voting's actually pretty even. Actually, interestingly enough, when we look at the white contestants, they were almost all gone by mission 2, right? You know, like, the highest a white person placed in the fan voting was 5th. And that was like the last mission. You know, we weren't actually seeing that certain groups of people were consistently in the top. We were seeing an incredible mix of people. We were seeing, you know, everyone from Megan to Samara to Sophia to Lara to Ezrella to Yoonchae to Daniela. Different people who were all in the top 6 at one point or another. There was no set group of people. And like I said, I think it's really interesting because we get to see that white people aren't actually rewarding anyone for fitting their bill of what a minority should be, right? They're instead using it as a way to demean other people of color, right? To set an example, you know, to kind of be like, you're doing so well, you're not like those other minorities. And that creates this infighting, the sense of competition that everyone should strive to meet white people's approval, to be the perfect minority, but that just doesn't exist. The perfect minority is a minority that's happy, right? A perfect minority is a minority that is able to live their life without, you know, fear of being persecuted, without fear of having to deal with racism, just being able to live. And that's not what the model minority seeks to make. It seeks to make something that tries to emulate, like I said, whiteness. When we look at the voting, we get to see that people will ride and die for people that actually look like them, that actually represent their culture, because they don't get to see that. Hollywood has said that basically everyone who's famous is going to be white, and if they are a person of color, it's almost always someone who is as close to white as possible, right? We don't get to see people who are actually representing their culture consistently because that's just not what at least America deems as okay, especially nowadays, right? I think that it's amazing that we get to see these people rally for each other, that we get to see, you know, people fight for their community, fight for representation. And although I wish they didn't have to fight, it's incredible to see just how much power they hold, right? In theory, a lot of these girls shouldn't have been able to debut, right? In theory, because this was voted by the general public and especially by K-pop fans, we should have seen specific people just absolutely dominate the charts, but we didn't, because people were so ready to fight for their faves, to fight to see representation finally. I think it's so amazing that people are able to do that and that it's able to work, right? The model minority as a concept doesn't exist to uplift people. It exists to tear people down. It exists to create fighting. And every day that we kind of stray further and further and that we open our minds and accept that there isn't such thing as a perfect minority, we become closer to acceptance as a whole. I think that we've come a long way. And, you know, even with all of the hate I've seen from Katseye, I really do see people kind of point out this blatant racism. It still exists, obviously, and there are still so many Katseye fans who unfortunately only stan a section of the community, but we do genuinely see so many people call out this blatant racism. We are progressing as a society, even if sometimes it feels like we've plateaued. I genuinely think that Dream Academy and the love and support that all of these girls have gotten as a whole shows that even in trying times like these, we genuinely can see so much progress. The only model minority is a minority that is happy, healthy, and loved. Hi, hello, it's me on a completely different day. I was editing this and I wanted to touch on something that I feel like I didn't articulate well enough. And that just has to do specifically with how I mentioned the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? The way that I talked about how obviously, you know, we can see with the model minority, and especially when we look at Katseye, right? Like I said earlier, that Southeast Asians tend to be treated better than the other people, right? Just because society views them as having good traits, and that makes you closer to whiteness in the eyes of the white man, right? Like, good traits are inherently white. That's not true, but that's just how it's viewed through that lens, right? And I feel like I almost villainized certain people with the way I taught. Not necessarily villainized, but I do think that I kind of made it seem like, oh, like, they just get perk after perk after perk, and they're kind of not susceptible to the downfalls of being a person of color. I want to make it very clear that I don't feel that way. And maybe I don't even need to do this, right? It's mostly just like, hey, like, I do just want to touch base on this, right? Because as a whole, right, like, when it comes to just Southeast Asian people in general, I think the model minority puts a lot of pressure on them. I think, you know, it's almost like they're like, white people are like parading them around, right? It's like when a show has like a token gay character or something and they parade them around and they're like, look, like, we can't be. And that's what I feel like a lot of times we see with, you know, this group of people, is that they're showboated and that they're kind of used as a metric to be like, oh, like, look. But we constantly see that, like, the media and that people as a whole aren't really willing to look at them as an actual person and instead look at them as a concept, right? It's why it's so hard to find Asian representation that doesn't pigeonhole them into, like, I'm smart, I like books, oh no, I gotta be, right? Like, they don't benefit from this system in the way that, like, you would maybe think, right? They don't benefit, they're more so just maybe shielded. Or in the case of Katseye, I don't even know, it's kind of a shield, but I think it's more so that they're not actually doing anything, right? That's the big thing. None of the members have actually really done anything controversial. So when people want to hate, they have to look for something small. And you could do that with, honestly, like, any of the girls if you truly tried. The difference is just that, like, they're trying. That's literally it. That they're trying to find reasons to not like these girls because they've been not liking them from the start. And I just wanted to preface that, right? Like, I don't think that Southeast Asians are gaining so much from this model minority concept. I think that they are suffering just as much as everyone else. I just think they're suffering in different ways, and I think for the purpose of this video and what I was talking about, that kind of got pushed to the sidelines, and I just want to make it, you know, abundantly clear that everyone suffers. Literally the only person benefiting is the white man, and that fucking sucks, and if something's benefiting the white man, we should stop, in my personal opinion, which I know is crazy coming from, you know, someone with the same coloring as Casper the Friendly Ghost, but I do believe that that is the case. I hope I articulated this well. I didn't write a script for this. I'm kind of just going off the dome. So I hope that makes sense. Heart emoji. Hi, hello, or bye, goodbye. I can't think of another word for bye. I hope you enjoyed this. I felt really weird about how to word so much of this. It took me so long to do. I really wanted to talk about it for a while. And, you know, with Internet Girl coming out, I just felt like it was a good time, but I just couldn't really find the word. I was also very busy. So, you know, a lot of stuff happened, but I hope that you enjoyed this. I always worry when I make stuff like this that I'm not just, like, doing, like, bare bones, like surface level stuff. I mean, truthfully, like, you know, I'm sure if I did like an hour or two long video expose on all of this, I could do it, but I also just, that's not where my heart is, right? I just kind of want to address issues, talk about how I do think that change is happening, and I do want to bring happiness, and I hope that, I feel like so much of my stuff is so negative, calling out like fat phobia or like AI usage or whatever, but I do genuinely, like, I want to spread positivity, even if maybe it doesn't seem like I'm doing that. I think I'm gonna do something very lighthearted for the next thing I do. I want something fun. I want something silly and goofy. But yeah, I hope everyone's doing so well. I hope that you're having such a great day. Yeah, heart emoji, smiley face emoji. I feel like this is that point where it's supposed to be like and subscribe, but I'm not doing all that. Also, this is probably like a 30-40 minute video, so I feel like you would have already done that. But I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're having a great night. I hope you are thriving. Heart emoji, smiley face emoji,